I'm like maybe 15% sure I own the card that I'm trying to build around. Like maybe higher than 15%. I swear I've seen this card and I like thought I had it. I was reasonably sure I knew where it was. I like thought that I had stuck it in this box and I haven't found it yet. So just should have maybe checked that I had the card before I started filming this whole video. But like, don't worry, just give it a second. We're going through. The idea of a fairy is strangely ubiquitous. You see an image of a fairy and immediately it brings up ideas of magic, flying, and wonder. The concept of the fae, or equivalent, nearby worlds of spirits and tricksters, is so interwoven into cultures worldwide. The trickster is someone causing mischief, like leprechauns in Irish stories, oni in Japanese folklore, or coyote in many Native American stories. This trickster figure is a role fairies often fill as well. The concept of fairies is so ubiquitous that we named an entire genre of folklore after them: fairy tales. Fairies are an immense influence on popular culture, showing up in movies, novels, and games like Dungeons & Dragons. They're even having a moment in the Magic the Gathering story with the father-son relationship between Oko and Kellen. This is the second summer in a row that I've spent a fairly significant portion of time dressed up as a fairy. Parker's already most of the way ready. Kat looks way more ready. I have not started getting ready. Let's go!
Look number 1! We have the beautiful cat. Next, we're gonna be shooting this fairy queen.
Hello. So it's snowing.
It's May.
Snowing.
Our spring fairies are a little bit snowed in, but here we go.
We're getting ready for shoot number 2.
Hello. We are fairies in the woods. It's only a little bit snowy. We are so cute. Okay.
Can you two brave the snow for like 5 seconds for an outro clip? Post photo shoot comfy clothes, we just need Parker. We brave the snow! It's like still dumping snow. Okay, but
It's very pretty.
it's very pretty.
If only we'd brought cloaks.
Literally anything other than what we
Anything
brought.
else other than the barely clothes we brought.
We're in these fairy outfits, like. But it was great.
This is so cute.
Thanks for coming on this journey with us. And this is great. I love dressing up as fantasy characters, and I had so much fun doing a fairy photo shoot with friends in the woods and wandering around the Unicorn Festival as a fairy performer.
There's so many fairies here. I'm here with Rosalie. We have Delphi and a unicorn princess. We just did the fairy farewell and now it's almost over.
And I really love fairies now. But something you might not know about me is that I used to be pretty scared of fairies. You may or may not know that I am absolutely terrified of birds. This is something I've talked about before. And while I know that fairies aren't avian, the idea of something flying by my face evokes that same fear I feel with birds. Furthermore, my family's Irish, and my granny told me stories about the Fae folk, and I have to say, many of them left me feeling like the Fae really didn't have my best interest at heart. My granny is a wonderful storyteller. She's written children's books and can make any story feel magical and exciting. She's written historical fiction and has a way of making you feel like you're there. She told me Irish fairy tales, stories seeped in the magic of her childhood. She also told me tons of stories from when she was younger. Ask me sometime about the dating advice she'd give me. So you can only imagine that the fairy tales she told me would sit inside my head and leave me thinking long after I heard them. I used to wonder why so many of her magical stories didn't have traditional happy endings, at least at first glance. Now, looking back, many of these bittersweet endings feel perfect. The Irish mermaid abandons her family as soon as she gets back her magic cape and her freedom. The boy who once knew the language of the birds ends up forgetting. And the fairy thieves can so easily separate families, but they find a way to come back together. The ambiguity of the happy ending, the questions her stories left me with, always make me love her stories even more, especially as an adult. Now, I myself am not an expert in Irish folklore, but I do know that Irish fairies felt really real when I was young. They might not have been in our world, but the mystical dimension they inhabited felt tangible, like I could slip in the woods and find myself tumbling through a fairy tree into a tricksy fairy. I also really enjoy reading books about fairies. I was recently introduced to the romantasy genre, which is like romance and fantasy smushed together, and I've been devouring books. I love reading. I recently flew to Europe for a convention, and rather than sleeping on the plane, like I should have, I read the entire flight. It was wonderful, until I almost fell asleep during lunch after I landed. I haven't built a fairy deck in Magic the Gathering yet, but I've upgraded the fairy precon, and I do gravitate towards blue decks in Magic. I love playing cards on other people's turns. And there's a fairy card that I've been eyeing for a while, and I've been flirting with building a deck around him. I should note, I've been flirting with building the deck, not the card. That's reserved for Edgar Markov, I guess. Anyways, the card Kellen the Kid was released in the Outlaws of Thunder Junction set this year, and it immediately caught my eye. I spent a lot of time thinking about Thunder Junction, and even made a YouTube video for the Wizards of the Coast YouTube channel for Thunder Junction.
Howdy, I'm Anna Margaret, and I am so excited to share what we know so far about the Outlaws of Thunder Junction set. Let's take a look at what we learned from the debut video, chat about what was spoiled at MagicCon Chicago, and dive into the story, arena pre-orders, previews for the set, and some events to celebrate the release. We get to join Oko and his crew of miscreants to go on the run and complete a heist. Let's go.
I had a ton of fun making this video and diving into the story and new mechanics for the set. I was inspired by a lot of the cards, and Kellen especially, because it really ties into many of my favorite Magic mechanics. I love the Doctor Who set and how much it leaned into playing cards from places other than your hand with the paradox mechanic. I love Cascade, and I love Impulse Draw and playing things from exile. So this card seemed perfect for me specifically. But that was a really busy time for me with conventions and projects, and I never followed through on building this deck. So that's my plan for today. I'm gonna start looking for cards and putting a list together. Don't you love this? I'm mostly through the video and just now telling you the inspiration. You're welcome. It's fine. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. These are fun cards. This is definitely not it. We're in the wrong spot. I put it somewhere else. I thought maybe I had put Kellen the Kid into a deck. That would be that makes sense. But then I was checking, and I think I would have put it in my Joda deck. Wait, could I have? No.
Okay, so this plan is going okay. I've set aside some cards that I think would be really good. I've got Brazen Bar, this Cute Bear, Nightshade Dryad, Dibblefit, Foretold Soldier, and the 13th Doctor. So I've started setting aside some good cards for this deck. I also like River Song's Diary. I'm really excited to name it some of these different cards. I can't find my copy of Kellen the Kid. I said 15% sure before. I'm not sure if I'm more sure or less sure, but the fact is I can't find it. Oh! Never mind. Good news. I have it.
I think it's wonderful to love something from afar. That's how I feel about birds. It's perfectly fine to admire them from a distance as long as they don't get too close to me. But I'm glad that as I've grown, my fear of fairies has settled into more of an appreciation. How do you feel about fairies?